I'm loving Fridays. We get a chance to chat with a guy who has forgotten more about politics than most of us will ever know. Of course, I'm talking about Michael Shure. What's up with you, sir? How are you? Yeah,
I'm well.
very
I went
excited
to
to
a
speak with you.
I went to a Jimmy Buffett tribute concert last night, and it was
That
like,
was quite the show. I had a couple of
oh
pictures
my,
sent to me
oh
from
my
that
God,
concert.
it was the best memorial service I've ever been to, and it was great. I mean, yeah, people came out who you wouldn't have expected. Snoop Dogg sang "Gin and Juice." Paul McCartney sang "Let It Be," all on the same.
Wow.
Yeah, John McEnroe was there, like talking about stuff that he had done. Woody Harrelson, Harrison Ford. It was, and then all this great music too. I mean,
Wow.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Well, there are three of them
well,
right
they
there.
were all there. Yeah, they were all there.
Throw me some other names. I saw somebody sent me a shot of Joe Walsh playing.
Jackson Brown, Joe Walsh, the Eagles, J.D. Souther, Sheryl Crow,
Wow.
Pitbull. Yes, you
Yeah.
heard
Pitbull.
correctly. Yeah, I'm forgetting people.
That's terrific. That's really cool.
It was really great. Yeah, it was fantastic. And then at the end, they all sang together what they do with these things. So
All right, I have to ask because that's the kind of show I do. Super expensive ticket, or what? How did it come to you?
I bought them yesterday afternoon. They've been super expensive. It was the fastest show ever to sell out the Hollywood Bowl. I have a friend who works at the box office, an old friend who works at the box office there, who said that he couldn't do anything. Even parking was sold out, and he can usually do anything. And then sort of middle of the day yesterday, I bought tickets, and it was they were not super expensive. They weren't great either, by the way. But
Right, but
I was there, and the Hollywood Bowl.
And that's one of those things that those music shows, and you just go, if you're in the arena, you're hearing the music. I mean, I don't know that you need to actually be. If you're not in the first 10 rows, it probably doesn't matter. I mean, I don't know.
Correct. I totally. And you say that when you have bad seats.
Of course, I was gonna. We all want to sit closer.
Right.
Well, that's really cool. I am struck today by something that is happening, which is that the party of the GOP is completely, I would say, taken over by Donald Trump. And again, this is not breaking news, except when you see the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, go to Mar-a-Lago, and you see the former President Trump having explicitly made clear that he wants no progress on Ukraine money, that he wants no progress on border money. You see a guy who may not even end up in the Oval Office manipulating serious questions that involve America on the global stage. And I'm talking about Ukraine and the southern border as well, and it goes on beyond that, purely for political reasons. I find it deeply disturbing.
Well, I mean, it is. It's interesting. In our lifetime, we haven't had the former president who is running for office again. And I think that when you have been a president and you know that you have a captive audience and everyone in your party knows that audience is so captive, it changes the dynamic and the hold that you have over the party in office. If Donald Trump were a new candidate right now, and even if he were the nominee still, or the presumptive nominee, he wouldn't have this kind of a hold over the Congress, but he does because he already has a brand and he's already been president. So I think that there is, we don't remember what it was like when Grover Cleveland was running for re-election against Benjamin Harrison, but even what I'm saying is that it's an unusual circumstance that you have somebody who's a known quantity who has run the country before and run the party and is the standard bearer of the party. He has a hold over these people, and Mike Johnson knows that he needs that support. He needs that support to save his job, and he needs that support as well to sort of galvanize Republicans around an issue that they see as, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, in this segment, as there's an issue that's overtaken this election, which is abortion. And Johnson wants to turn it to election fraud and the border. And he needs Donald Trump in order to do that.
No, I'm so glad you touch on this because it's remarkable to me that what has happened in Arizona reminds everyone of what had happened with this Trump-installed Supreme Court, an activist court that is stacked toward this plan to overturn Roe. They did. And now in states like Arizona, abortion is being outlawed. And that reminds everyone of the stacked court. Not that they necessarily needed the reminder, but as you've suggested or implied, it's crowded out all the other things that the GOP would like to focus on. They'd like to, it doesn't matter what they say now, inflation, border, they can make as big a deal out of Ukraine, et cetera, that they want. But
Yeah.
the only thing I think that is taking space in people's heads is abortion right now.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. The Dodd decision overturning Roe and what's happening in Arizona, what has continued to happen in other states, has been the best political news for the Democrats. It's something that is loathsome in terms of policy, in terms of law, to so many Democrats, and really, frankly, to most Americans. However, it is helping the party politically to get power back, or to stay in power in the places where they have it. And so it's a very odd terrain for a party to, they have a punching bag now, right? They have these what they term backwards decisions, and the Republicans have no idea what to do about it just yet. So what they're trying to do is talk about things that have been sexy to their base, which is election fraud, which is, of course, the border, and it's just not penetrating in the way that abortion is penetrating. And I think that is, in fact, going to be decisive. I mean, if the election were held today, which is the dumbest thing in politics, because it's not, it would
No, you're right. It's always said, is your point. Everybody always says if the election were held today, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Right. If the 49ers, if the Super Bowl had ended at halftime, the 49ers would have won the Super Bowl. But the point is that you have a very, very strange dynamic going on, which is that Democrats see this horrible legislation in their ideas. It's hampering the Republicans, and it is a political gift for them, because what is it doing? It's taking so many women out of the game for Republicans, and those are the voters that they needed to win back in the swing states where they needed to score victories, where they lost in 2020. So this is a very, very unusual election. I think you're going to see the impact of this. And Mike Johnson going to Donald Trump today, is going to be at Mar-a-Lago today. It's to show unity of the party, and that they have their eyes on other things, and you'll hear about those.
So this is interesting. So let me follow up on the Mike Johnson thing, then I'm going to double back on the election. The Mike Johnson thing, do you think there's any chance that Johnson could have extracted some kind of concession from Trump? I mean, and this is a truly, speculative type thing, but in other words, is it always just, tell me what page of the hymnal I'm supposed to sing from, sir, Mr. Trump?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. This is obviously a guessing game. My guess is that a victory for Mike Johnson would be to get Donald Trump to stay out of the inner workings of the leadership of the House, and the motion to vacate, which is a motion to take his speakership away, which has been floated by Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. And so I think that there is in fact some currency to be gained by getting on the same page with Trump, but also saying, please just stay out of that part of this, right? Stay out of trying to either call for my ouster or not. And it looks like there's going to be a vote today where they're going to do a FISA bill, which is the surveillance bill, which is something that the leadership has been fighting for. And there was originally a 5-year plan. Johnson scaled it down to 2 because a lot of the conservatives were called by Donald Trump to say, vote against this. We don't want a 5-year FISA renewal because when I'm president, I want to completely overhaul FISA. So now they have a 2-year renewal. It's going to be voted on and most likely be successful. It's bipartisan. The president will sign it. The reason is because Trump wanted to be able to come in as president and totally overhaul FISA.
Well, I mean, and whether or not he'll get that done, I mean, he doesn't exactly, even during his presidency, have some sort of distinguished legislative record. But I now go back to the election, and this FISA thing is a big deal. I mean, there's been a back and forth, and the question of warrants essentially that need to be produced to cull information and data from Americans. It's a significant bill.
But again, it's a significant bill. It's important. The voter who goes into the election booth in November and says, "I'm voting for X because of FISA," you can probably count 20 of them, right? And most of them are.
Absolutely. No, of course you're right.
Yes,
I think if you could stop 1,000 people on the street and they wouldn't even know what you're talking about.
No, of course not. They wouldn't. I mean, it's the FBI voter who's going to be the voter.
Right. Now I want to double back to the election. So you've got this radioactive issue that is huge. You have these ridiculous, antiquated views of what laws should be over women's reproductive rights. And the thing I've been chirping about since the very beginning here is put abortion on the ballot, put it on as many ballots in as many states as you can. I'm talking about a ballot measure to codify a woman's reproductive rights. And that will ensure two things: the turnout, and very few people are showing up to codify that those rights without pulling the lever for Joe Biden, or at least not pulling it for Trump.
Right.
How will it handicap? Here's where I look at Arizona and I go, are they going to modify this? You'd think they'd have to, and yet the legislature, they seem in no hurry to modify it. They seem the opposite of guys in a hurry.
Yeah, well, I mean, they seem like it. I think a lot of it has to do with the legal part of it, and you can't hurry law. But I do think, which is a great Supreme song covered by Phil Collins later. But the
okay.
that was an accident. I actually stumbled into "You Can't Hurry Law," but that's why what these legislators are doing. They can't change this as quickly as they want to, many of them. And I think that's a big problem. And that's something you're seeing in Arizona. Then you go to Florida, not a swing state, it's a red state. But, you just spent a little bit of time on the show talking about Florida. What they are doing there is they are going through and talking about ballot measures on abortion. And that would change everything, the entire dynamic of the election, the national election, because of Florida then becomes in play because of this, because there's a restriction on when an abortion is it 6 weeks, is it longer, when does viability kick in. These conversations are not conversations that the Republicans want to see America having ahead of an election. They do not want people to come out to vote on election day because there's a ballot measure on abortion, because they know it's a losing battle for them.
Yeah, so well said. That's exactly right. And they're going to have that conversation now. And to whatever degree you can modify these draconian laws and antiquated laws and ridiculous medieval laws, I would almost call them, that are inflicted upon women, you may or may not be able to do that in time. And it seems it's truly a radioactive situation for the GOP. So now I want
to I should point out, Mark, I just interrupt. The Democrats have feared that immigration is going to be a radioactive issue for them. So this is a double victory in a way, because what it does is it doesn't just help them get people out to vote in these states with ballot initiatives and on an issue that is overwhelmingly favored by most Americans, which is choice. But it also diffuses what is a real detriment to them going into an election, which is having to answer for immigration and having to fight images, whether they are true or not, having to fight what is now in the public sphere as something that is accepted, that there are too many immigrants coming in, that there's not enough border patrol, that Biden has open borders. Whether you believe any of that or not, that is what's being sold and people are buying it. But that is diffused by abortion, that's why it's a double victory for Democrats.
It's such a great point. It's funny, I was talking to someone this morning about third-party stuff. There it is, how Biden's campaign plans to pummel Trump on abortion. And, you don't need to pummel much. It's just self-pummeling that's going on.
And by the way, sorry, I keep interrupting, but Trump is having to pummel himself a little on abortion, too, by moderating within his own party. That is, very, very difficult. Those are difficult waters to navigate. To his benefit is the fact that even if conservatives are irate over his moderation on abortion, they're still going to vote for him over Biden. But it does hurt him in having to defend himself. A nominee on the defensive is never a good place to be.
Yeah, well, and one night taking credit, I'm the one who gave you the Supreme Court and gave you what you wanted, and the next night saying, I don't agree with everything that's being,
Right.
and he doesn't have he has tremendous, he has a nose for the marketing of policy and, for serving up the BS, essentially. I've got a big plan, and I've got a plan on infrastructure, I've got a plan on healthcare, I've got a plan, whatever it might be. So when it comes to just, floating BS, he's got it. But on this one, there are so many specifics, and we've seen them play out. The BS just doesn't, it stinks too much for him to really sell it. So it really puts him in a tough spot. And speaking of tough spots, he's going to be in court. Now, I guess on one level you could say, yeah, it's baked in. He's a guy with legal problems, witch hunt, Biden's Justice Department, et cetera. And you can do that arithmetic. But what we're going to learn in court, and what will also be in the news cycle, Michael, to the degree that people are aware of it, is the way in which the Trump organization doled out money to women to keep them quiet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not helping him predictably will not help him with women voters. I agree with you. It's baked in, and it's been proven that what Donald Trump does doesn't matter that much to the people that support him most. But he hasn't been convicted in this way. And if he is convicted, it stretches things out. We're going to be talking about it more. He's going to be mired in this legal stuff. And I think what it does is it adds to the fatigue. And I have to think fatigue always hurts. There was Clinton fatigue. There's been Reagan. There was Reagan fatigue. People get tired of the same thing. And if you're just exhausted by reading about Donald Trump in court, even though it's baked in, I think it does have an effect on voters. Not maybe enough to change an election, but it's another difficult, place for Republicans to be.
That's a really interesting take that honestly I hadn't thought of in relation to the trial. Like at some point you just want, because what I think is his barking, Trump's constant vituperative rhetoric, you do tire of that. And I think it begins to not work anymore. The angry guy screaming on the courthouse steps.
Right.
So when you think about the trial and you think about that, just his style, you begin to grow weary of it. And I think what is interesting about the point you're making is it has an effect on your enthusiasm about this guy over time.
Right. I think that's the biggest part. And it's hardest to predict, but there's certainly a part of human nature where that happens. And I predict it will happen to some degree because of just the continuation. It's why Donald Trump wants all this stuff delayed. It's not on legal grounds. It's, I don't care what they say and what they do when I'm president. It's getting to be president again that I care about. And
no, he has to get to that finish line. That's absolutely right.
Anything that stymies that would be a problem.
So if you look at the races nationwide, it does look like the House will be retaken by the Democrats.
Yeah.
Less clear. The Senate really is a more challenging situation for the Democrats.
Yeah,
And
no question. Made more challenging by Larry Hogan, a popular Republican governor of Maryland, entering that Senate race, which could really change everything in the Senate. The House does look that way. I mean, look, the House is barely Republican right now. And part of what the conservative Republicans are so upset about is that Mike Johnson has had to make deals with Democrats to get anything done, including funding the government, just because his majority is hardly a majority. And Republicans are getting off the train pretty quickly and retiring, and not just saying I'm not going to run again, but actually just leaving Congress. So it does point in that direction. The House is going to go back to the Democrats, and Hakeem Jeffries would be Speaker, which would be a big challenge to Donald Trump, of course, and a safety net for Democrats. But They do want more. And the Senate, though, is going to be a bit trickier for Democrats. There's going to be something that surprises us in one of the Senate races, unquestionably. But nonetheless, the Democrats are, I think, up against it in the Senate, at least to keep a 51-49, maybe a 50-50s in reach.
In our last minute or two, I want to ask you about the House. Maybe you can help us. This is really where your political acumen is so needed. How does a party like the GOP get held hostage by someone who is as shallow, vacuous, and utterly crazy as Marjorie Taylor Greene? How does one House member and a thin coalition of people hold an entire party like this hostage? Or am I characterizing it incorrectly?
No, you aren't. I mean, it's something that they put in. And so a motion to vacate the chair, which means to say that the speaker's chair is vacant. It takes one member of their party to do that. And so it's something they created, and it's something that has hurt their party in terms of how they're viewed. There are lots of protections for members of Congress in terms of voting, in terms of the rights, the filibuster law, So one person can stand in the way. Tommy Tuberville did it earlier this year for quite a long time, the senator from Alabama, on military appointments. And so I think that when you look at it, it's probably a good thing, but it also means that once in a while you're going to get a Marjorie Taylor Greene to come along and say, I don't care what Trump and Johnson do in Florida. I'm glad that they're together on issues or whatever. My point is that Mike Johnson is too tight with the Democrats and he shouldn't be there. And that's all it takes right now. And so it's a funny place. It's a funny thing to hear, but it's really true. So all it takes is one member of Congress to file a resolution to remove him, and then it goes up on a vote. And
do you recall a situation that was akin to this?
Kevin McCarthy is what it was.
Prior to that. Prior to this particular bag of crazies getting in there, was
Yeah, they had. So Speaker, I think it was Joe Cannon in the 1910, something like that, had a motion to vacate against him. Boehner, they tried to do it, John Boehner, in probably 2014, 2015. So there is precedent for it. It hasn't succeeded really until you saw it with John Boehner. And then with Kevin McCarthy. And so now, like impeachment, it becomes diluted. It's just somebody standing on ceremony and doing something like this. Remember, impeachment was such a sacred thing when it happened to Andrew Johnson, then didn't happen again until Bill Clinton over 130 years later. And so that mere fact that that's how rare it was, and now it happens every Thursday that somebody's talking about impeaching the president, Trump, Biden, whatever, and so it becomes diluted. I think probably that's what's going to happen with this at some point. It's going to be a joke, but you got to get the jokers out of there in order to change the tide of this stuff.
Michael, great stuff. Did we leave anything out? Reflections on O.J. Simpson, I thought what the Simpson thing pointed out, just as we look back, was sort of aspects of the culture of the legal system. It brought a window into the legal system but it wasn't, in a way, it wasn't a real window on anything but rich celebrity.
Right.
And race, to be honest. The race perhaps was the better window.
It was about race, and there were a lot of people at the time who justified it. Said, "Look, I think he murdered him, but black people have gotten such a raw deal in courts in America over time. Give them a victory, and even as unfair as it is, there was a lot of sort of equivocation in that regard." But going to what you just said, the people that sort of stood in the way of that were just, no, it's not because he's black. It's because he was rich and he was able to afford these lawyers, F. Lee Bailey and Robert Shapiro and Bob Kardashian, who was kind of his personal lawyer. So I don't know. I think you were spot on. It's more of a window into a cultural time and look, we all we all know where we were when we watched that chase and what it meant. And it was the first celebrity trial we remember. It was court TV all over the place, and to that end, it was a phenomenon. But he was a bad guy. He went back to jail for 9 years in Nevada. He was, he was found liable civilly. He was acquitted. So you have to say he was acquitted of murder. But by the same token, he ended up not being a good guy.
Yeah, I mean, and he was a violent guy who
He was a violent. Yeah, I mean,
beat up a lot of people, beat up a lot of women.
Yeah, I don't mean to say that in a muted way. He was, he had this persona on the outside where he played Nordberg in the Naked Gun movies, and he was the happy guy running through airports and whatever for Hertz Rent-A-Car. But he was a bad guy.
Yeah, it is wild. The contrast was so bizarre. The way he was so beloved, he had that wonderful manner and easy manner on television, and as an athlete deified, then as a celebrity deified in his own way, and the cops, who of course were made out to be these conspiracy-ridden people trying to railroad Simpson, they had been covering for him for all these years that he had been doing all of these awful things.
Totally. Yep. That's
It was
exactly
a weird
right.
place. All right, Michael Shure, I'm told that you want some. You're troubled that you don't have any swag at all.
I'm glad it finally got to you. My complaints. You write and you write and you write. You never think the correct people are getting these emails. But I need stuff.
I think you deserve some swag. If we can find out where your secret bunker is, and if it can receive a package, you will get one. I promise, within the next 30 days.
Well, it's on tape now, so we'll see.
Indeed.
Okay.
Find Michael across the Twitterverse, across the webverse, across the World Wide Web. Love seeing you always, sir. Thank you. Michael Shure, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye, Michael.
Bye.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.